Before you were born into this world, something was lost, something ancient, something divine, something that was never supposed to descend into the darkness of matter. The Gnostics called them the Fallen Aeons, and what happened to them is not just a cosmic story from a forgotten text. It is the story of you, your soul, and the prison you are living inside right now without even knowing it. There was a time before time, a moment before the first breath of this universe, before the first particle of dust, before the first flicker of what we call reality. In that moment, there existed a realm of pure, infinite light. The Gnostics called it the Pleroma, the fullness, a divine ocean of consciousness so vast, so complete, so overflowing with truth that nothing within it could ever suffer, decay, or be lost. This was the original home. This was where you came from, and this is what was taken from you. Within the Pleroma, there were divine beings of extraordinary power and luminosity. The Gnostics called them Aeons. These were not gods in the way religion has taught you to picture gods. They were not sitting on thrones demanding worship. They were not casting lightning bolts or demanding sacrifice. The Aeons were emanations of the true source itself, the one the Gnostics called the invisible spirit, the monad, the first father. Each Aeon was a living expression of a divine quality: wisdom, truth, grace, life, foreknowledge. They existed in perfect pairs, in a sacred balance of masculine and feminine energies, radiating the fullness of the source into the eternal now. And among all of them, one Aeon shone with a particular brilliance. Her name was Sophia, and her story is the story of everything that went wrong. Sophia, whose name means wisdom in the Greek language, was the last and youngest of the great Aeons. She burned with a longing that none of the others carried in quite the same way. She desired to know the source directly, to reach beyond the divine pairs, to touch the face of the invisible spirit without going through the proper channels of divine emanation. The ancient texts describe this as an act of passion, of overreaching love, a moment where wisdom herself forgot the very boundaries that kept the Pleroma whole. And in that singular moment of divine longing, Sophia acted alone, without her counterpart, without the consent of the invisible spirit. She reached outward, and in reaching, she fell. What emerged from her uncontrolled creative impulse was something the Gnostics described as monstrous and pitiful at the same time. A being that was lion-faced and serpent-bodied, with eyes that flashed like fire. A being born not from the fullness of divine union, but from the fracture of an incomplete act. This being, called Yaldabaoth by some Gnostic traditions, and also referred to as the Demiurge, came into existence without the light of the true source. He was, in the most essential sense, a mistake, a cosmic accident wearing the face of a god. And here is where the tragedy deepens beyond anything most people have ever been told. Yaldabaoth looked around at the void surrounding him and declared, in a moment of catastrophic ignorance, that he was the only god. He had no knowledge of the Pleroma above him. He had no awareness of the infinite realms of light that had produced the very spark he carried within himself. He was blind to his own origin, and in that blindness, he began to build. He fashioned 7 subordinate rulers from his own distorted power. The Gnostics called these beings Archons. Each one was assigned dominion over a layer of reality, corresponding to the 7 classical planets that ancient astronomers observed moving across the sky: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, the Moon. These were not merely celestial objects to the Gnostics. They were the 7 gates of the prison, the 7 governors of the material realm, the 7 chains wrapped around every soul that enters into physical existence. Beneath these 7 planetary rulers, Yaldabaoth constructed a vast material universe. Stars, galaxies, planets, the oceans, mountains, living creatures of every kind. From a distance, it looked like creation. It looked like the work of a loving and intelligent designer. But the Gnostics saw through the surface. They recognized the signature of a counterfeit architect, a being who could arrange matter but could not originate light, a being who could copy the forms of the Pleroma but could not reproduce its substance. Every beautiful thing in this world carries within it a shadow. Every flower wilts, every body decays, every relationship ends, every civilization crumbles. This is not an accident. This is the fingerprint of the Demiurge, a creator who builds with borrowed light and calls the result perfection. But something extraordinary happened in the middle of this construction. Sophia, watching from above, horrified by what her act of longing had produced, refused to abandon her creation entirely. The texts describe her weeping at the edge of the material realm, mourning not only her own fall, but the suffering of the divine sparks that would become trapped inside Yaldabaoth's world. And in her grief and her love, she breathed something into the material creation that Yaldabaoth had never intended. She breathed the divine spark into humanity. This is the hidden architecture of your soul. When the Gnostic text, known as the Apocryphon of John, one of the most significant manuscripts discovered among the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945 in the Egyptian desert, describes the creation of the first human being. It tells a story radically different from the one most people have heard. Yaldabaoth and his Archons attempted to create a being in the image of the divine light they had glimpsed reflected from above. They shaped a physical form. They breathed material life into it. But the figure lay motionless. It had no power. It could not rise. Because the Archons, for all their ability to manipulate matter and energy, could not manufacture genuine divine consciousness. They could not create life from within themselves, because they themselves were not truly alive, in the way the Pleroma is alive. And so, through a cosmic maneuver that the Gnostics describe with unmistakable wonder, Sophia arranged for Yaldabaoth to unknowingly breathe the divine spark, the pneuma, the true living light of the Pleroma, into the human form. The moment that happened, the human being rose, stood upright. I shone with a radiance that terrified the Archons themselves. The texts say the Archons looked at what they had made and were afraid, because what stood before them was not just another creature of matter. It was a being that contained, somewhere in its deepest interior, a fragment of the very light that had preceded their entire existence. This is why the Archons immediately moved to contain the situation. They could not destroy the divine spark. It was beyond their reach, but they could bury it. They could layer it over with flesh and bone and blood. They could surround it with survival instincts, with hunger, with fear, with desire, with the endless noise of physical sensation. They could construct a reality so dense, so overwhelming, so immediately demanding of attention that the soul inside would simply forget it was ever anything other than a body. This forgetting has a name in Gnostic cosmology. It is called the Veil, and it was not an accident. It was an engineering decision. Think carefully about the world you live in. Think about how much of your daily existence is consumed by the maintenance of a physical body. You must feed it, rest it, protect it, clothe it, medicate it, and eventually watch it age and fail. Think about how much of your mental energy is consumed by fear. Fear of death, fear of poverty, fear of rejection, fear of meaninglessness. The Gnostics would tell you that none of this is the natural condition of a divine being. None of this is what the Aeons experience in the Pleroma. All of it is the architecture of the prison, designed not to torture you, but to distract you. Because a soul that is constantly distracted never looks inward far enough to find the spark that Sophia planted there before the Archons had a chance to cover it over. The Fallen Aeons are not just a myth from an ancient desert scroll. They are a description of the mechanics of your own consciousness, the divine qualities that should flow freely through your awareness. Wisdom, truth, grace, foreknowledge have been fragmented by the fall into matter. You carry them all, but you carry them in pieces, in flashes, in moments of sudden clarity that dissolve almost as quickly as they arrive. That moment when you look at the night sky and feel something vast and wordless move inside your chest. That moment when you sit in silence and sense, just for an instant, that there is something behind your thoughts that is watching them without judgment, without need, without fear. That is not imagination. That is the echo of the Pleroma. That is the divine spark that Sophia refused to abandon, even when the Archons were certain they had buried it deep enough to never be found again. The Gnostic warning embedded in the story of the Fallen Aeons is not a warning about theology. It is not a warning about which religion to follow or which sacred text to read. It is a warning about attention. The Archons do not need you to worship them. They do not need your obedience. They need only one thing: your forgetfulness. As long as you remain convinced that you are nothing more than a body moving through a material world toward an inevitable death, as long as you continue to identify completely with the roles you play and the fears you carry, as long as the noise of the physical realm remains louder than the silence where the divine spark lives, the system runs exactly as designed. The prison does not need locks and bars when the prisoner has forgotten they were ever free. But here is the knowledge that the Gnostics guarded above all else. The fall was not permanent. The Fallen Aeons did not descend forever. Sophia herself, according to the texts, was eventually restored to the Pleroma through a process the Gnostics called repentance. Not repentance in the religious sense of guilt and punishment, but a turning around, a redirecting of awareness back toward the source. And what was true for Sophia is true for the divine spark inside every human being. The Aeons fell, but they can rise again, not through ritual, not through belief, not through obedience to any external authority, but through gnosis, direct, immediate, interior knowing of what you actually are beneath every layer the Demiurge has placed over you. The story of the Fallen Aeons is the story of a wound in the fabric of the divine, but it is also, if you have ears to hear it, the story of the most extraordinary act of love in all of cosmic history. Sophia fell because she reached too far in her longing for the source, and in her falling, she ensured that the source would never be completely absent from the prison she accidentally helped to build. Everywhere you look in this material world, in the face of another human being, in the structure of a snowflake, in the way music can shatter the walls between the self and the infinite. Now you are seeing the fingerprints of that love, the light that was never supposed to be here, the light that came anyway, the light that is waiting inside you, right now, to be remembered. The Fallen Aeons did not descend into matter so that their story could be forgotten. They descended so that one day, inside a world built by a blind architect, something would remember the Pleroma and refuse to stop reaching for it. That something is the divine spark inside you. It was planted before you were born. It has survived every lifetime, and it is listening right now. If this truth stirred something deep inside you, drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe the divine spark is truly capable of when it finally remembers its origin? If this video opened something within you, make sure you subscribe to Gnostic Inner Eye, because what we are uncovering together is only just beginning. The deeper we go, the closer we get to the light they tried to bury.